On February 5th, 1954, Gabrielle Chanel stages her haute couture comeback in Paris, and the French press turns on her almost immediately. She is 71 years old. She has been gone from fashion for 15 years. By the next morning, the reviews read like an obituary. Then something strange happens. An ocean away in New York, the exact same Chanel suit becomes one of the most requested designs in American stores within the year, and it never really leaves. The split between those two reactions has very little to do with taste, and everything to do with a detail sewn into a hem that almost nobody notices. And what she built still influences how women over 60 dress today. The show itself runs at noon at 31 Rue Cambon, and the room is so oversubscribed that some of the most important editors in fashion end up sitting on the stairs. There is no music, no flowers, no printed program. Nothing to soften the room before the first model walks out. Her name is Marie-Hélène Arnault, the face of the house through the 1950s, and she is wearing a plain navy Chanel suit with a boxy jacket and a white blouse tied at the neck. Small tabs sewn inside the skirt's waistband button directly onto the blouse, holding everything in place without a single visible pin, finished off with a soft bow at the neck. Biographers describe the mood backstage as closer to a courtroom waiting on a verdict than a fashion show. Within hours, the French papers respond like they've watched her finish her own career on stage. One American headline at the time literally calls it a gamble, describing her as taking a chance on a comeback. Across the ocean, though, the reaction flips completely. French Vogue eventually calls it a piece that represents everything Chanel has believed in all her life, but that recognition takes time to arrive at home. In the moment, it's American buyers along 7th Avenue, the heart of American fashion manufacturing, first, and they move fast. Orders come in within months. Some biographers compare its instant popularity to the status of Chanel's little black dress. What the French press treats as an embarrassment becomes one of the most copied suits in a country that supposedly didn't even invent it. Sit with that for a second. The same Chanel jacket, shown in the same room on the same day, splits an ocean clean in half. One side calls it finished. The other calls it the start of something. That kind of gap doesn't happen by accident. To understand it, you have to go back to why she came back in the first place. Chanel had been away since the war, and Paris fashion had moved on without her. By 1947, Christian Dior's new look ruled everything. Cinched waists, padded bras, heavy skirts, stiffened jackets built around restriction rather than movement. The new look defined post-war haute couture, and Chanel hated it. She believed women would eventually rebel against being dressed like ornaments again, and at 71, with most of the industry treating her as finished, she decides to bet her name on that instinct one more time, in public, with everyone watching. Her argument has very little to do with style. It centers entirely on function. Post-war women are working, traveling, and moving through their own lives without a maid to manage layers of fabric, and Chanel designs for exactly that woman. Dior dresses women to be looked at. Chanel dresses them to move. That single difference, more than anything about taste, is what eventually decides which side of the ocean comes around first. Pat Cunningham, an editor at Vogue at the time, later put it bluntly. Before Chanel's return, fashion required women to travel with steamer trunks just for their clothes, and a maid on hand to manage every petticoat. That world is exactly what Chanel built her comeback to dismantle. To even reopen the house, she needs money, and that means going back to Pierre Wertheimer, the businessman who already controls her perfume empire. The new arrangement, Chanel Société Anonyme, gives the Wertheimer family full ownership of the company. Chanel keeps creative control. She does not keep the company. So when she walks out in 1954, she isn't just risking her reputation. She's risking it on a house that, on paper, no longer fully belongs to her. That's the real shape of the stakes. 71 years old, 15 years out of the industry, financially dependent on someone else's money, stepping back into a fashion world that has already crowned a different silhouette as the future. If this fails, there is no second comeback waiting. So why does it work? Start with what the Chanel jacket actually does, because this is where most retellings stop too early. Chanel strips out almost everything a tailored jacket is supposed to have. No shoulder pads, no darts, no stiff interfacing, and no collar. What she adds instead are 4 real pockets, cut large enough for an actual hand, not a decorative slit. The fabric is soft wool jersey or tweed, never structured, and the sleeve sits high and slim so the arm can move freely instead of fighting the seam. Chanel's own description of the build is simple. The inside should match the outside, she says, and she means it literally. The jackets are lined in silk, finished as carefully on the inside as the outside, which is not standard practice for a piece of clothing nobody is meant to see the lining of. The trim matters too. Thin braid runs along the neckline, down the front, around the pockets, and along the hem, always matched to the fabric rather than fighting it. Even the buttons carry meaning. Depending on the piece, they're stamped with a lion's head, a camellia, a sheath of wheat. Sometimes the interlocking C's themselves, small details most people glance past without registering. And then there's the part almost nobody talks about. Sewn into the hem of the Chanel jacket is a thin chain. Its only job is weight. It pulls the fabric down just enough that the jacket hangs the same way whether you're sitting, standing, or reaching for something on a shelf. It never rides up, never bunches, never needs adjusting. It is, by any modern standard, an unglamorous solution, a chain sewn into a hem. And it's the reason the silhouette still reads as elegant on a moving body instead of a mannequin. So if a chain sewn into a hem and 4 real pockets are the actual secret, here's a question worth asking. Why did nobody recognize this construction the first time Chanel tried it? Here's where it gets interesting, because this construction is not actually new in 1954. Almost 30 years earlier, in 1925, on the same street, Chanel debuts a boxy jacket with interlocking buttons and a chain sewn into the hem to hold it in place. The fabric is tweed, borrowed originally from a relationship with the Duke of Westminster. She'd worked with a tweed manufacturer in Scotland years earlier to make the fabric lighter and more comfortable than the stiff sportswear version it copied. The same approach she brings back in 1954. She liked the ease of his jacket, had it remade in a softer weight, and put it on a runway under her own name. It does not become a phenomenon at the time. It's one design among many. So the comeback collection in 1954 is not actually new. It is 30 years old, dusted off, and finally delivered to an audience ready to listen. Chanel didn't invent the silhouette that saved her career. She just spent 3 decades waiting for the world to catch up to something she had already built once. That reframes the whole story. The French press isn't rejecting something new and strange in 1954. They're rejecting an idea they could have embraced decades earlier and missed. The Americans aren't discovering some radical innovation either. They're simply the first market willing to say yes to a piece of clothing built entirely around how a woman actually moves, rather than how she's supposed to look standing still. The turnaround, once it starts, is fast. By the fall of 1954, just months after the disastrous opening, Chanel shows her 3rd collection, and the tone has completely flipped. Life magazine, the same publication that had been watching from the outside, now says she is influencing everything. According to her own biographers, she regains her full standing in under a year, faster than even she expected. So with all of that working in her favor, why doesn't this get remembered as a clean win? Chanel never gets the company back. The Wertheimer family keeps full ownership of the house carrying her name, all the way through the rest of her life and long after it. The Chanel jacket becomes one of the most recognized garments in fashion history, and she builds it, refines it, and defends it for nearly 2 more decades inside a company she does not own. The win is real. It is also incomplete, and it stays that way. You can see why the story narrows down to something like she proved them wrong. It reads as a cleaner headline, but the more accurate version is messier. A 71-year-old woman bets everything on an idea she had already tried once and abandoned, is rejected by her own country, is adopted by a different one, wins back her reputation within a year, and never fully owns the result. The jacket outlives her anyway. She dies in 1971, and 12 years later, Karl Lagerfeld takes over the house. For the next 35 years, he keeps reinterpreting the same silhouette, the same boxy shape, the same chain, the same 4 pockets, season after season, on runway after runway. By the time he is done, some version of that 1954 Chanel jacket has walked nearly every Chanel show since it first appeared. Think about that for a second. Almost every other detail from that February in 1954, the financing, the press cycle, the courtroom mood backstage, fades into footnotes. The construction is the only part that actually survives intact. Walk into almost any store today selling tailored jackets for women over 60, and you will still find pieces built on some version of that weighted hem, that soft, unstructured shoulder, that high, slim sleeve made for movement instead of posture. Most of the women buying them have never heard the name Wertheimer, and most do not need to. What they are responding to is a decision a rejected 71-year-old woman made about how clothing should behave on a real moving body, a decision she had actually made once before, 30 years earlier, and simply refused to let go of until the world finally agreed with her